In today's video, I'll be installing a 1-inch spacer lift on my 2022 Toyota Tundra. The spacer we're using for the install is from Cornfed. If you want to check it out, a link to it is in the description below. The first step is to lift the truck up and remove the rear wheels and tires on both sides. I've got a floor jack on either side of the truck, so I've got both sides lifted up, and then I've also got jack stands on either side as a secondary precaution, and then I've also got a bottle jack under the rear differential because we're going to need to drop down the rear axle. So you're going to need to have either a bottle jack or a floor jack for that part of the installation. Once you've done all of that, the next step is to disconnect the rear sway bar. Our rear sway bar is right here, passes through over the rear differential to the other side of the truck, and it's connected to the rear axle at two side mounting plates, one right here, one on the other side, and we've got a 17mm nut on the top and the bottom on either side that need to be removed. You may need to use a breaker bar to get these loose as they are pretty tight. And we're just going to go ahead and remove these 17mm nuts, all four of them, two on each side. And then we're going to disconnect the rear sway bar. So with those two nuts pulled away on either side, we can just gently pull the sway bar back and away from the rear axle. Next up, we're going to disconnect the rear shock from this upper mount. We've got a 19mm nut on top, and then you use some channel locks to just hold onto the top of the shock and prevent the shock from spinning. All right, and with this nut off, next we're going to remove this whole piece from the top and set these aside for reinstall. All right, so with the upper shock mounts disconnected on either side of the truck, I've got the rear axle supported by this bottle jack. We're going to go ahead and gently drop down the rear axle now. Keep an eye on your brake lines for this step and make sure you don't overextend anything. I found that the bottle jack was a little bit too tall when I dropped the axle down, so I went ahead and swapped the floor jack and the bottle jack so that I can push this down a little further now. Get us the clearance that we need to get these rear coils out. So we're just going to apply some pressure here, lift up on this coil, and pull it out. Are. Next up, we're ready to install the spacer, and you're going to be able to tell which one is the passenger side and driver side by which side has the bolts here. So this is the passenger side because it's got the two bolts. The one that's got the two bolts here on the driver's side is going to go on the driver's side. We're going to take this, we're going to insert it up at where the top of the coil would be. It's a little hard to show you this step because we've got a lot of conflicts up here, but there's two holes that are already drilled in the frame. You're just going to pass these two bolts through that, and we've got two 3/4 inch nuts that we're going to tighten on the top of these. So I'm going to put it up from this side, and then I'm going to have to get up behind with the wrench on this side to tighten those as well. Clearance is a little bit better on the driver's side. So the coil went in on the driver's side pretty easy, but because I've got all the tension from that side now and the fact that we've added an inch up here, I'm having a hard time squeezing this passenger side coil in. So I've got my bottle jack in use again here to basically separate the axle from the frame here and give us the clearance that we need to fit that in. I found that as I was extending that, this brake line was getting a little bit tight, so I decided to go ahead and disconnect that just to be safe. You'll see you've got a 12mm bolt right here that needs to be removed, and that will give us plenty of leeway in this line to drop that down without breaking it. So I recommend that you disconnect that to be safe, and we'll go ahead and space this out, drop our axle down. Go ahead and give that a try. It'll fit this coil in. First, you got to make sure your bump stop goes in on the top of the coil, and then on the bottom of the coil, you'll see where it terminates here. There's a very clear spot on the bottom of this mount right here where it dead ends. That's where you want that coil to terminate. So go ahead and lift the top portion into place first. See if we have enough clearance now to fit that in. Looks like we do. So squeeze that in. Make sure that lines up, and then we'll go ahead and release this jack stand. One thing you are going to need to do as you raise this axle back up is make sure that the top of the coil is mounted correctly on both sides. So just make sure that lines up with our spacer. Okay, that is loose. So go ahead and pull this out. And then we're going to drop it back down underneath the axle so that we can raise that up slowly while we make sure that, again, the top of these coils are mounted correctly. And also, before I forget, I'm going to reinstall this 12mm bolt here for the brake line. And once that's back in, then we'll raise that axle up. Now, as we raise up this rear axle, not only do we want to keep an eye on the bottom and top of these rear coils, but we also want to keep an eye on the upper end of the shocks here, make sure that they pass through the holes in those mounts. All right, and with these upper shocks lining up again, we're going to go ahead and drop this piece back on. You'll see that it's got a little edge here that needs to stick down through that hole, so we're just going to shift the shock to get that to pass through properly. Okay, and with that there, we'll then take this nut here, start by screwing it on hand tight. Next, we're going to take our channel locks and secure this shock to keep it from spinning. You can take our 19mm wrench, and we're going to start tightening this nut up top. Go ahead and tighten that up all the way, and do the same on the other side. With the bolts reconnected on both upper shock mounts, now we're ready to reconnect our sway bar. So we're just going to slide this into position here. We've got a washer and a nut. It goes on both the top and the bottom. Get those on hand tight, and then we'll tighten them up with a wrench. Once again, they are a 17mm. So the last step is to reinstall your wheels and tires, drop it back down on the ground, and it's also a good idea to get an alignment after lifting the vehicle. If it wasn't dark outside, I'd give you guys a closer look at the truck with the lift kit installed. Since it's dark right now, be sure to check out the video at the end of this video, and that will give you a good look at the truck with the lift kit installed in broad daylight. If you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comment section below, and for more videos of the all-new Tundra, be sure to subscribe. In the meantime, thanks for watching.